Welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. We are here today in the heart of the city, in Lovelocks Cafe, down by the entrance to the Birkenhead Tunnel, if you want to come and check it out. So if you're listening to this and you hear a few things a little bit different on the podcast today, we are in a live environment. There are people clunking away and baristas making the coffee. But I am joined by Chris Beesley to have a chat about all things Everton. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, Matt. And I saying a lovely scenario here for us, a new setting, new look, very very formal here. But no, we'll try and keep it relaxed.
Yeah, absolutely. Very serious interviews. I feel like a politician is going to ask you some serious questions about the state of things at the moment. But we are here to talk about the Blues. And just a reminder, if you are listening to this and you want to see this setup, do come over to our YouTube page. Do go over to the Facebook page if you want to check out the podcast or consume the podcast in a different way. But Chris, it's a quiet time of the year, I think, as it always tends to be. Early July when it comes to football. Players not quite back at pre-season. Transfer window only just opened. But there's a few things we can chat about when it comes to Everton, on and off the pitch. On the pitch, probably the biggest news of the week is that Everton signed the captain up for another year in Seamus Coleman. I think there were some small fears towards the end of the last season when he got that injury and was famously now stretched off and encouraged the team that we might see in Seamus in an Everton shirt for the last time. And obviously there's a situation with his contract. It didn't sort of come about straight away. But it's done now, and you've got to say, looking at it in isolation, look at the way Seamus played last season, it's a positive move from the football club, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, on so many elements, on and off the pitch. Seamus Coleman, just such a massive figure for Everton. He's at the tail end of his career. I know Carlo Ancelotti said he might be able to play on until he was 40. Perhaps in Serie A, I'm not too sure, in the Premier League. But that's a measure of the man, isn't it? He's still got plenty in the tank. What I thought was actually telling was at the end of each season we tot up the player ratings from every Echo game. Obviously, we mark each player out of 10 at each game. I mean, it's the bane of our lives in many respects because it's not always universal agreement on those numbers from either players or fans alike. But yeah, it was telling that Seamus Coleman, I think, was actually the highest rated outfield player. So I think Jordan Pickford got the highest average mark. I think the players who'd played a lot, there's obviously players who played a couple of games got higher marks. But yeah, if Pickford was number one in more than one respect, Seamus Coleman was second after him, and it was a big improvement on the year before where he struggled at times. So yeah, a return to form for Coleman. I mean, it's good and bad in the fact that Nathan Patterson's been brought in. He is the long-term successor and the future of that position for Everton. But Seamus Coleman, they said, not just the leader, and I'll go on to that in a second, but those performances have justified that. It was a return to form. Crucial goal, of course, against Leeds United, and he meant it. Of course, he meant it from that tight angle, Marco van Basten-esque. But yeah, we talk about Coleman, the man. Frank Lampard has said last year, the greatest man I've ever met, or some words to those effect, after Everton stayed up against Crystal Palace. And it's not just platitudes, you hear it from all of the squad. He's just such a leader, and he sort of bridges that gap because he's the last of the David Moyes era players and sort of that generational gap within the dressing room. Such an inspirational character, and it's one of those you call a no-brainer, getting in for the extra year. I mean, it can only be good things for Everton.
Yeah, I think for me, I think leadership sometimes is something that's maybe talked about a bit too much and exaggerated a bit too much in football. But I think in Coleman's case, it is so important to Everton because I feel like if you look at every other aspect of the club at the moment, be it what's going on in the boardroom, what's happened with managers in recent years, the rest of the squad, it's just been in such a constant state of flux, hasn't it? And everyone's been changing. There's been new faces everywhere. And I feel like you need to have at least one solitary thread of consistency going throughout the entire football club. And Coleman has been able to provide that, hasn't he? And you saw that late last season where he was on the bench cheering the team on. I think the manager confirmed and other players confirmed that he was in the dressing room and around Finch Farm, geeing the players up, showing people what it means. And I suppose at the time when the club has sort of lost a little bit of its identity, certainly its positive identity, having someone who can sort of remind the players what it was like when he first came into the team and Everton were good and doing things well, that's got to be dead important, hasn't it, to have around?
Yeah, I just wish there was a Seamus Coleman who was 15 years younger. I mean, that'd be incredible. But yeah, like you say, that patchwork quilt of a squad if we're being kind, or a Frankenstein's monster of a squad if we're not being so kind, that Everton have got from all those different managers with vastly different footballing philosophies that's been created. And I think that's a big part of the problem, that they don't have that consistency. Just a couple of visitors to the cafe on the way there. But yeah, he does sort of bridge that gap in time-wise between the David Moyes era and sort of the differences between then and now. And Moyes was there for over 11 years, and you had that consistency. He was one of those players who came in, who had those values. Of course, the famous 60 grand fee, and it's taken from Sligo Rovers, plucked from the Irish League. And, it didn't come straight away. Obviously, he was loaned out to Blackpool in those early days, and very much, a rough diamond who needed polishing up. But yeah, what a player he's been. And all the players, all his teammates say that. I remember speaking to Alex Iwobi ahead of the last game of the season, the survival showdown against Bournemouth. And he says, trust me, Seamus Coleman will be there. He'll be in the dressing room. He'll have words to say. And that is just such a big thing, because there are sort of question marks about the character in this Everton squad. And not just this one. It goes back to, I think, when Marco Silva was there the last 5 years. People said, are the characters in there? Fabian Delph's been and gone. We all know what he was like. But fortunately, he was never on the pitch enough. But yeah, Seamus Coleman... he's a great fella on and off the pitch, and it would be, I'd hope to think when the time comes when he does hang up his boots, that he'd be one of the ones like Leighton Baines is now, who would stick around and be still at the club in some capacity.
As a player as well, you mentioned there about what he's been able to do on the pitch, and being honest, mate, like when he first came through. And like the player he was, and you think about starting off as a winger and then becoming this sort of raiding right back who'd score goals, who'd make goals. And I think when you looked at him at his best, and you'd probably go to that first season under Martinez one, where you say that was like peak Seamus Coleman. I think even at that point, when you were talking about how good he was, there was always a caveat a little bit by, well, defensively he's not quite there. He's maybe got a little bit of a weakness there. And I think one of the most underrated aspects of his game is that as he's got to this age, he's obviously had a lot of serious injuries, hasn't he? He can't do those long busting runs as much anymore. But he's got that intelligence, I think, that maybe not people thought he necessarily had when he first came through, that he's been able to develop his defensive game so well. And I think right now, at a stage where Everton have got a manager in Sean Dyche, who, let's be honest, is not going to say to his fullbacks, charge up the pitch whenever you can, lads. It feels like for the player he's become and adapted to, he's got the right manager that can sort of prolong him and help him through this next year. Yeah,
I think Sean Dyche has all Everton managers, but nothing but full of praise for Seamus. And that was one of the things that he said. He said that for him, the age wasn't an issue. It's all whether he had that hunger, and he did have that hunger. But as you say, Matt, his game has evolved, it's matured. You mentioned that season under Martinez. I think that was did he get something like 7 goals or something like that?
Got in the PFA Team of the Year in that season as well.
He really was, the best right back in the Premier League at that point of his career. And he sort of revolutionised the position at Everton, because obviously before him, you had Tony Hibbert, great one-club man and respected Evertonian, but famously never scored a goal other than his testimonial against AEK Athens. But so Seamus revolutionised that position. But as you said, as he's got older, that defensive side of the game. Although I do remember, I think it was the first game after his double leg break when he came back at Leicester. He had that mad run in the last minute, almost like, I'll show you, I can still do it. But he's very clever. I remember, I think when Crystal Palace were at Goodison last season, played like Zaha, was in his pocket this afternoon, all afternoon. He was, there's a lot of occasions like that where he come up against the supposed danger men, and he keep them quiet. So his game has evolved and it has changed and matured. I'd say he's making the most of where he's at now. Maybe he's not quite at those levels of getting forward, but he's really canny and off the ball and sort of have opposition wingers where he wants them.
Yeah, still the best fullback of the football club, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's damning, isn't it? He is, but I mean, you could say that in many aspects. Patterson's a work in progress. Of course, he can do things maybe that Seamus can't do so much now. More like young Seamus, I guess. Vitaly Mykolenko on the other side has struggled at times, and we know even when Mykolenko's not been there, he's had to play players who aren't naturally left back in those positions. Godfrey and Mason Holgate have had chasings at various points. So yeah, it's definitely a case to say that, and I don't quite know what that tells you about Everton, but yeah.
Yeah, and just before we move on to talk about the stadium, you mentioned Nathan Patterson there, and it feels like by virtue of keeping Seamus around for a year, and listen, he may go on and have another year or two after this, you wouldn't put it past him, but we are coming towards the end of Seamus Coleman as a player. We can't deny that. It feels like for Nathan Patterson, not only to try and overcome Seamus Coleman and get in the team ahead of him, but to have someone around like that to be able to tap into their influence on a day-to-day basis, on a regular basis, that's going to be dead important for him, isn't it? Because at some point, be it next summer after, you'd like to think the reign's going to be handed over to him, and he's sort of going to be out there on his own and having to do it. And as a player, he's shown a lot of promise, but I think stuff like in terms of fitness and application and making sure you get all that sort of stuff right, he couldn't have a better example there on a day-to-day, could he?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Seamus has attributed to his longevity is that he just gives absolutely everything in training every day. It's not like he's going through the motions. Some players sort of come to life on a Saturday on a match day and sort of don't really like training. Seamus gives it everything. And, he comes in, he knows Nathan Patterson and quite a few who come before Patterson are there to try and take his place ultimately. And then he said, you're not going to have an easy ride. I'll keep fighting. I'll keep going as long as I can. So I hope that Patterson can learn from that. I mean, there's big concern at the moment with Patterson is the injuries, given that he's such a young man, the amount of injuries he's had since he's come to the football club. So that's a concern, but you'd have to hope he can only learn for having Seamus next to him, because that's sort of like the frustration with Mikalenko of the other flank, because okay, he didn't have a current player there as a mentor, but the fact that at the start of last season you had both Leighton Baines and Ashley Cole, possibly the two best left backs, certainly the two best English left backs you've ever had in the Premier League, and the fact that he hasn't quite kicked on the way they'd liked him to have done, so that's a big concern. But yeah, you'd have to hope that Patterson can only learn from having Seamus there, so not just as a player but as an example as a professional. Yeah,
certainly good news that Coleman's going to be around for another year at least at Everton. But moving on to stuff off the pitch, Chris, and this has probably been the debate of the week, hasn't it? When it comes to Everton, following on from the club's statements in regards to the stadium and giving everybody an update last week. Put shortly, it was sort of put out there that Everton might have to move from Goodison Park to Bramley Moore midway through a season, or certainly that option is being explored by the club, and it's something that they haven't really explicitly said before. I think they've sort of said we'd be moving in potentially midway through the 24-25 season, but it's the first time it's really been referenced as pointedly as that. We did a panel piece over the weekend on the Echo website where you asked, I think it was myself and Paul Wheelock, for our views on it. Yeah. I sat very much on the fence with this, so I'm just going to be devil's advocate to your opinion here when we do this discussion. But naturally, I think it's triggered a lot of emotions, hasn't it, among the fan base, because it is a very emotional issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. This has been going on for years and years. It's been going on for a generation at least. Talking about Everton moving stadiums when I was about 16, and I'll be 44 in August, and this has literally been going on a generation. And obviously, there was Peter Johnson's original move, which never really sort of specified where they were going to. Then there was the other waterside project at King's Dock, which is obviously now the arena, and then the hugely controversial destination Kirby. So all those have been and gone for various different reasons, and now it's finally coming to fruition. We can see the stadium. Certainly where I am in New Brighton, often I like to go for a run in the morning and look across. It's the biggest thing I can see in the city, certainly because of its prominent position. It dominates the skyline. So we can all see it there, and there's that tangible excitement of when the moment will come. But I imagine all Evertonians, whatever your view is on this, whether they should move straight away or not, if it's a mid-season move, I'm sure we all envisaged a move at the start of the season, nice and straightforward and sort of slick and what's the word I'm searching for? Sort of neat, a neat transition. Maybe that was a bit too much to ask for, but no. Obviously, when most clubs move to a new stadium, you finish one season in one stadium and you move on to the new stadium at the start of the next season, and that's what we all thought. We all imagined the last, the farewell to the grand old lady Goodison Park would be in May, final game of the season. hopefully Everton not having to win to secure their status, and you're moving in the following August to the dock. But as Colin Chong has pointed out, I mean, it's something that the club have sort of mooted, to be fair, for about 15 months at least now. I remember a financial briefing ahead of last year's accounts coming out, and it was sort of informally said at the time that, look, it's not necessarily going to be day one of season 24-25. And to be fair, the club have been saying that for a long time now. But for the first time now, Colin Chong has come forward, and obviously he's not just the main man with the stadium now. He's in that interim role as chief executive, and has said that their words to the effect of the final months of 2024. So the possibility is distinctly there for a mid-season move. I understand and have known I've understood for a number of months now that Lango Rourke are working to a timetable which would be December 2024. So we're looking, and remember, the club have got to get through another winter yet. And to be fair, the project hasn't been hampered adversely by the elements as of yet. But if everything goes to plan, and they are going to plan, everything is going to schedule, that you're basically talking about halfway through the season. So what do you get with that? Do you go straight away? And a lot of people think that's an economic reality, but then a lot of people have said not just an emotional issue, a logistical issue moving mid-season as well, or do you wait to the start of the 2025-26? I'm just trying to make sure I get my dates right with this one. Yeah. But for me, like everyone, I envisaged a start of the season move at first, and that was the ideal scenario, I'm sure, for absolutely everybody. But I just don't know how, fairly, there could be more delays, and if it gets pushed back further towards the end of the season, well, they might go, well, we may as well wait now to the end of the season. But I just don't see how you sit on a project, a project's costing over £500 million for up to 8 months. I just don't see from an economic point of view how the money men at the club would allow that to happen. I don't know about your thoughts, Matt. I know, like you said, you did sit on the fence, but yeah, I don't kind of know how that happens.
It is really tricky, isn't it? Because there's so much to factor into this, and I think everybody is, as the day comes closer that we're going to leave Goodison, I think everybody in their head has got their own idyllic final day at Goodison, haven't they? In that piece we wrote, I sort of put mine down as Everton winning the football match, obviously not potentially trying to avoid relegation like the last day of the season. I know it's a big ask. A nice summer's day, everybody being in the ground afterwards. I'm sure the club would do something lovely and give Goodison a great send-off, ambling around and speaking to people you've sat next to for years and years and years, and then going off to the summer and having some time to sort of prepare yourself, mentally and into going into a new place, because it is going to be a strain on a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be devastated walking off that ground for the final time. And I think the idea of doing all of that I just said in December, and then so we've got a midweek game on the Wednesday and it's at night time, and just being in that ground, and it's the same players, it's the same manager, the same kit. It's not like a new season. It just feels really abrupt. And I completely agree with what you've said in regards to the financial aspect of it, because let's say Everton finish that season in a similar position to what we are now, say we finish 14th, 15th, and then you're going into that next season and you've got an extra 5 million. And this is an arbitrary number. I don't know how much Everton would make from the stadium. But say Everton get 5 million from more money from having 10 games at that new ground, and then that in turn allows us to put money towards a transfer, which would in turn help us stay in the Premier League the season after. It's like, well, how do you turn that opportunity down as well? And that's where I think it gets really difficult. And I think ultimately it depends what you take from your football and how you consume your football. Are you about the emotions and the feelings and all that kind of thing that leaving Goodison Park will engender in a lot of people, or is it about results, players thinking brutally? So I think that's sort of where I'm sort of in the middle on where I consume my football, which is why I'm sort of in the middle on this decision, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one, because like you say, we'll set about the two elements in it. It is the emotional one first of all, and the club have stressed this now. Fans are likely to be consulted, but it's not going to be a plebiscite to the fans. Fans won't be having the final say on this. They will be in the discussion. They'll be part of that. But I think anything like at a football club, ultimately, it's got to be those at the top who are making decision, and the club have stressed that to us. But from an emotional, it's strange because nearly all stadium moves are like that. I think it's only off the top of my head, Tottenham Hotspur is the only one that, I mean, there will be other examples, I guess, but it's the only one I can, certainly in the Premier League. So they've set a precedent. It can be done. I know Gavin Buckland often joins us for these podcasts, and he's talked about the ethical element in terms of to have that fairness of you play every team at home and every team away, and it's the same ground. I mean, that comes into it. I mean, but like I say, Tottenham have set that precedent where it's been done once before anyway, so it's not like Everton would be the first in this respect. But yeah, like you say, the emotional goodbyes to Goodison Park, which is the first purpose-built football ground in England, staged more top-flight matches than any other. I mean, we could go on about the list of great events that has gone on there, and for both of us and thousands more, it's the place where most of our footballing lives have been spent. So yeah, you can't be flippant about and just say, turn the lights off now. See you at Bramley Moore next week. So yeah, they did. But I guess the big thing with this is coming from what the work schedule is, because if you had a work schedule, which was the club are insisting that there hasn't been any delays, and I know they've been very vehement in talking about reports who have denied that, say that this isn't where it should be by this stage, and it's pointed out facts that other parts of the project are actually further along than they were on earlier plans. So it's like I said, it certainly looks decent from where I can see it. So it's well on its way to becoming a football stadium, and certainly I think by the end of this year, most of the external side of the ground, the skeleton will be done. It'll actually be the internal fittings that they'll spend over the last months of the project. So that's all good. But if you are looking to a build a timetable that works to a mid-season, I think that's the issue which has caused all of this. If everything was going to be ready for like May, June, and it remains on schedule as we're told, well, we'd be okay with this. But it's the fact that, as we understand, that the timetable actually goes to December. So I guess this was always going to cause an issue like that.
Yeah, December's a bit of a nightmare time to finish when it comes to this discussion point, isn't it? Because like you said, if there's 5 games or 4 games to go, you probably say, well, let's just wait. If there's 10, 11 games left towards the end of the season, that's where it gets a bit tricky. But I think you mentioned Tottenham there and their move, and I think they're really interested on this from a couple of perspectives, because their last full season at White Hart Lane, which obviously they went and played at Wembley for a year and a half, didn't they, after that? Their last full season at White Hart Lane, I think because everybody knew what it was and how important it was, they were amazing there that year, weren't they? I don't think they lost a game all year. They were absolutely fantastic, and I remember going to when Everton played them in the last game, and the atmosphere was absolutely incredible, because I feel like everybody in that ground was just harnessing the energy. And it was the last time they played Everton. The week after it might be the last time they played Arsenal, the last night game, etc., etc. And you had all these little milestones for them to tick off, and the team really sees that and went on an amazing run, and I think they finished in the Champions League for places for the first time in a while. And I think it would be nice to Everton to have that, where it's going to be a full season. But on the flip side, the other thing with Tottenham, which I think is scaring a lot of people, is what you've just said there, in a sense that it was quite clear after they had their first season at Wembley that it was going to take a bit of time for them to move into the ground again. So they started that season, and I don't know if people remember, but they were getting updates pretty much every week, weren't they, saying the next game's going to be at Wembley, by the way, and the stadium's been a bit further down the line. And I think that is probably scarring a lot of our fans, in the sense that if you said, right, we're going to move in mid-season, and then all of a sudden it might be a case of, well, actually there's been a bit of an extra delay, so we're going to kick this down the road a little bit more. And I think something like that, it wouldn't take the shine off it completely, but it'd just be like, it's a bit annoying, this. I think that, from what I've seen and speaking to people, that's a fear of a lot of fans, that it could get a bit like that, where you're living week to week, not knowing what grounds you're going to be playing your football at. Yeah,
that's anyway, at Premier League level, that's not good, is it? On a week to week basis. I guess maybe we get a clearer idea next year, because like we're saying, one more winter to get through and see how that one goes. I mean, I'm sure Everton don't want this, but if a harsh winter coming up now could actually eradicate this issue, because if it does delay things and then you go, oh, well, we'll push through, wait till 25, 26 now. But yeah, like you say, I suppose the difference with Tottenham, like you say, was that they had that Wembley in between. It wasn't, because obviously it was being built on the same site. And by the way, I was fortunate enough to have a very lengthy behind-the-scenes tour of Tottenham's new stadium about 18 months ago with a great fella, John Jackson, he was called, lifelong Tottenham fan, and we were there for hours, and it was terrific. And it's very exciting. I know Dan Meese has said that he's building a Ferrari, not a Bentley, in terms that Everton's new stadium won't be as plush as Tottenham Hotspur's, which is kind of like a sort of shiny hotel from the outside, and it's in London, and they've got their clientele. I mean, Everton's is going to have a much better setting on the waterfront, but it'll be more of a practical building. But that's going to be like the closest example you've got to what Everton's new stadium's going to be like, and it's really exciting to be in there. So far superior than the first generation of new stadiums. I mean, Arsenal won't like it, but the Emirates, they're about a very similar size, but that were built like 15 years ago or so now, more bowl-like, further back from the pitch. Tottenham's is tight. The sheer the gradient of the stands, that's going to be more like what we're going to see at Everton, and it's exciting to be in. I've been to a couple of games there now. Not great results for Everton, but just as a facility, it's exciting to think that Everton have something very similar to that. But it's an issue. It's definitely out there, and it's not going to go away. And I've got a piece coming up. Evertonians, it's certainly not emphatic one way or the other in people's views on this.
Yeah, tough decision for the club to make when that eventually does come round, if it does stay to schedule. But we will finish by talking about on-pitch stuff, mate. Everton are going to be back at Finch Farm this week. You've done a piece today sort of outlining the schedule and how it's all going to go. So just for listeners who are missing the Blues and are desperate to see them back again and see all those lovely pre-season videos of there's going to be loads of bleep tests with Sean Dyche, you'd imagine, and stuff like that. So we're going to be in for all that. When can we expect all that? When are they going to be back?
Yeah, they're back later this week. I understand most of the players are back on Thursday. Players been on international duty. They might come back a bit later, as often is the case. And like you say, the first day is the test, isn't it? The body fat, the heart tests, all that. But I'm sure, say now that Sean Dyche is in situ, a lot of the supporters are looking forward to actually next week when they go to their Alpine training base, and the infamous Gaffer's Day that we've heard so much about from his time at Burnley, which is basically the first day of the pre-season training. Doesn't even get the footballs out for that one. He beasts the players. He makes sure that, and it's all for their benefit, and it's for our benefit. As those of us who want to see Everton do well. And it's an intense, it's a grueling workout, and it helps build that fitness base for the rest of the season. And I'm sure a lot of Evertonians want to see that with the players. Obviously, there's issues with fitness. We talked about it. The full-backs there, Patterson and Coleman, both had their fair share of injuries last season. Everton went into their survival showdown without either a recognised full-back in the side or Dominic Calvert-Lewin, their main striker. And again, Calvert-Lewin, 2 seasons on the bounce now. He's played less than half the matches for Everton. And when Dyche came into the job, he talked about getting him properly fit, or whatever the phrase was he actually used, talking about I would leave no stone unturned in terms of looking at his lifestyle, his diet, how many hours he sleeps, what kind of bed, what mattress he has, etc. And we're all all joking apart. We just want to see a fit and fly in Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and the same with the rest of the players, and hopefully a lot fewer days off through injury next season. So the players are back later this week. Like I understand, most of them on the Thursday, and like we say, we've got next week. It's off to the Alps and the game that they've got in and Neon a week on Friday.
Yeah. When you're going out to Switzerland to cover the games, surely we've asked the question, can you take part in Gaffer's Day and see what it's all about? I mean, surely that's going to be on the cards.
Keen, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm actually going to Switzerland because my colleague Joe Thomas has broken his ankle playing football. If only that'd be great, wouldn't it, to get some access? I'm not too sure how many I'd be keeping up with. I don't know. I don't know if that say more about them than me. If it was like, I don't know. I won't name names. If it was lapping somebody, but no. I think those days are behind me. But yeah, if the invite was, I could do my own little mini version of it, perhaps.
Oh yeah, we'll have to ask Sean about that. But no, Chris is over in Switzerland covering all the Everton's pre-season stuff next week. So do keep an eye on the Echo website and all our socials for that. Cheers for listening or watching today. Thankfully, no pesky red is coming. rip this shirt down here in Lovelocks Cafe. Because you brought this one in today. It's from the 93 to 95. So I should probably explain for people who are listening to this. We've got an Everton shirt hanging in the background here on video. It's from the 93-95 season.
Yeah, back when you used to have the shirts for 2 years. Yeah, it's almost as old as you, that, Matt. Yeah, it still fits me. I'm actually playing a game this afternoon, and I'll be putting that one on, rolling back the years. But yeah, the fond memories of that one. It was mixed memories, because it was actually worn for both the Wimbledon '94 game, the first Great Escape, and then they wore it on the cup run. Joe Royals Dogs of War all the way through to Wembley, and of course the Tottenham Hotspur semi-final 4-1 at Ellen Road. So yeah, it stood the test of time, and hopefully have more memories like that in the future, the better ones at least. And it looks nice up there, doesn't it?
I'm a fan of that one. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get a few more different ones as we go on with this video format. But no, hope you've enjoyed it. If you watch us on Facebook or YouTube, cheers for tuning in. That has been your Royal Blue podcast. We'll speak to you again very soon here at the Liverpool Echo.